Welcome to another episode of Digging Deeper. My name is Bradley Martin, welcoming you. Thank you for joining us. If this is your first time, welcome. If this is your multiple times, I appreciate you hanging in there with us. We are in the middle of studying the book of Exodus. We have come to chapters 13. Today we're going to look at chapters 13 and 14. In our previous episode, which if you want to go back and listen to any or all of those, you can get those on our church's social media, whether it's Facebook or YouTube, and look at any of those, or you can find us on podcast, whether on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you find your favorite podcasting shows. But last week we looked at the actual leaving of Israel from Egypt. A lot of stuff has happened in the first 12 chapters of the book of Exodus. And again, I don't want to rehash all that stuff because we went into great detail. But Israel being under bondage of Egypt was the major power of the day. Pharaoh was in charge. He was the king of Egypt. There was a slave owner type of bondage type of a relationship between Egypt and Israel. Israel was under slavery. They were forced labor. They were going through some difficult times. When God called Moses to go and tell Pharaoh to let his people go, he actually made it more difficult on them to where they were starting to complain about Moses and Aaron, who was Moses' brother. And you had this series of plagues that God sent on the land of Egypt and on to show both to Pharaoh and Egypt, as well as Israel and us today, his power and his might. And so the first 9 increasingly got more and more strong until the very the last one, the 10th one, which is where God sent the angel of death throughout the land of Egypt and all the firstborn. And it's important to remember the key here, the firstborn, and that comes up today again as well as throughout the scriptures. The firstborn of all the people in the land were killed unless they put the blood of the lamb over the doorpost. And in that case, the death angel passed over, and that's where we get the festival of Passover. That Jews still celebrate today, and we celebrate that as Christians around the same time as Easter, and so you have that same time frame there. So when this plague occurs, this is the last straw. Basically, well, what Moses was told to tell the people is that after this 10th plague, not only are they going to let you go, they're going to send you away. They're going to make you leave because of all the pressure and stress as well as the death that was going on there. So they did that. They forced them to leave. We found that last week, and so they forced them to leave. They gave them actually all of their possessions. They left not only with what they had, but also the possessions of all of Egypt. So they did not go empty-handed. And so this week we're going to look at what happened when they first got outside of Egypt, and I realize that things typically, when things go well, there's this negative rebound effect, and I've mentioned that before. I think I mentioned that in an earlier session on the book of Exodus, to where Moses went to Pharaoh. He said, okay, God, I believe that you're sending me. I'll go. And so that good moment where he went had a negative kind of an echo or rebounding effect because Pharaoh did not, of course, at that time let his people go. God had hardened his heart. And there was more pressure from the people at that moment in time that happened. So we're going to see that same thing today. As soon as the people go, you're going to have this negative thing that's going to happen. I don't want to get ahead of myself in the story, but you're also going to see the finality of the story. So oftentimes, God uses negative events to bring finality against his enemies. And you're going to see that in the scripture for today. I want you to also be thinking of, what is my purpose here on this earth? And you may have asked that question. You may be asking that question. Okay, you're trying to find your purpose, and those things specifically end up in different avenues. So God may be calling you to teach. He may be calling you to work in a church. He may be calling you to work where you're at. And so we oftentimes think that we hold certain positions less because of they're less grandiose than other positions are. Let's say God's called me to be a pastor and a teacher, but you're called to be a factory line worker. Does that make my calling any less than yours because I have this title or whatever you want to say? And the answer is no, it does not, because that's not what your purpose is. That's your specific assignment while you're doing this, and your specific calling, or all of our overall calling, is to bring glory to God. And we do that through the Great Commission, which we find in Matthew 28, to go and make disciples of all nations, baptizing them, teaching them. We also are following not only the Great Commission, but the Great Commandment, to where we love God and love our neighbor as we love ourselves. And so whatever specific assignment you have, and those things change, whatever specific place or assignment that he has you in, if you are glorifying God, if you are making disciples, and if you are loving God and loving each other, then you are fulfilling what your purpose is. And it may not look like mine does. And obviously it won't look like what mine does, because I have a different area of influence than you may have. And the reason I bring that up is because, why did Israel have to go through all this stuff? Why did the plagues have to happen? We on a kind of a side trail here, we often wonder or confused or concerned with the phrase that or the thought that God hardened Pharaoh's heart. And if you look and you do a deep dive into the actual language there, it doesn't mean that he caused him to sin, because ultimately he had the power to sin. But that thought is that there was already a thought in there, and that thought developed into what happened. So not a more recent, well, it is, but a New Testament example of that is with Judas. Judas, who ultimately betrayed Jesus, still had the ability, even though his place in history was to be a traitor, and which ultimately led to the death, burial, resurrection of Jesus. But he had a choice. He always had a choice. He always had a chance to go the other way. And so in all of these things, Pharaoh had the choice. He had it in his mind that he would let them go or he would let them stay. He had both those thoughts. But ultimately, that choice of not allowing them to go and causing suffer and pain through his people, to where his people were actually saying, you need to get rid of these people, that was on him. That was his decision. And we'll see here in a little bit in chapter 14 how, again, his heart was hardened, which caused the ultimate demise of that. So let me start off, before I get too far ahead of myself, in chapter 13. We have left Egypt. We are on the way to the promised land. We're on the way back to the land that was promised to them. And God's going to institute a feast here. And he's also going to talk about consecration of the firstborn. So the first part is about the consecration. So that's the first couple of verses. The Lord said to Moses, consecrate me now, or set apart, or set up for sacrifice to me all the firstborn, whatever is the first to open the womb among the people of Israel, both man and beast, is mine. Now, does that mean that God wanted them to sacrifice every firstborn creature, every firstborn child, every firstborn beast? No, it doesn't. It means that they were set apart. They were set apart for God. It's that thought of first and best. If you, like us, you listen to Pastor Joby Martin. He talks a lot about first and best, and I struggle. Okay, I'm not preaching at you. I'm preaching actually to me here, because when you give, the thought is to give your first and your best, not what's left over, and not anything that's less than what your best is. You go back to Genesis 3, 4, somewhere in there, when Cain and Abel both gave a sacrifice, an offering to God. Abel gave his best. Cain gave an offering which was not his best and his first, and God did not take the offering of Cain. He rejected it. But he did accept the gift of Abel, and ultimately Cain killed Abel because he was jealous of that. And so you see this idea of first and best. You also see this firstborn. As I mentioned before, there's this discussion throughout the scriptures. This is not the first time you see about the firstborn, not the last time you see about the firstborn. The firstborn is seen as the best, or and I say that tongue in cheek, because I am a firstborn child. Not saying that I'm any better than my brother, but that first has something to do with whenever you get something, you offer that as an offering. Okay, so in this case, they were to offer that as an offering. It goes on to talk a little bit later about how that is to happen, and we'll get there. But you remember that the firstborn in Jesus' time was killed. Okay, they had to flee from Bethlehem because Herod was killing all the firstborn males. Jesus ultimately, as the firstborn and only Son of God, was the only one that was able to settle the debt forever and forever on behalf of us. So that firstborn, while we are to give our firstborn consecrationally, I think that's the way you say that, but we are to consecrate or set apart that firstborn for God. God did the same thing for us. He gave us his best, his first. John 3:16, for God so loved the world that he gave his one and only begotten Son, that whoever believes in him should not perish but have eternal life. And that's what you see. So God doesn't demand anything from us that he hasn't already given to us prior to this. Now, verse 3, then Moses said to the people, remember this day in which you came out of Egypt, out of the house of slavery. For by a strong hand the Lord brought you out of this place. No leavened bread shall be eaten today in the month of Abib. You are going out. And when the Lord brings you into the land of the Canaanites, the Hittites, the Amorites, the Hivites, and the Jebusites, which he swore to your fathers to give you a land flowing with milk and honey, you shall keep the service in the month. 7 days you shall eat unleavened bread. And on the seventh day there shall be a feast to the Lord. Unleavened bread shall be eaten for 7 days. No leavened bread shall be seen with you, and no leaven shall be seen with you in all your territory. You shall tell your son on that day, it is because of what the Lord did for me when I came out of Egypt. And it shall be a sign on your hand and as a memorial between your eyes. That the that the law of the Lord may be in your mouth. For with you a strong hand has brought you out of Egypt. You shall therefore keep the statute at his appointed time from year to year. When the Lord brought you into the land of the Canaanites, as he swore to you and your fathers, and shall give it to you, you shall set apart for the Lord the first opens of the womb. And it talks about that first. All the firstborn animals that are males shall be the Lord. Every firstborn of the donkey you shall redeem. A lamb, if you will not redeem it, you shall break its neck. Every firstborn man among your sons you shall redeem. And when the time is come, your son shall ask you, what does this mean? You shall say to him, by a strong hand that the Lord has brought us out of Egypt from the house of slavery. For when Pharaoh stubbornly refused in the land of Egypt, when he stubbornly refused to let us go, the Lord killed all the firstborn in the land of Egypt, both the firstborn of man and the firstborn of animals. Therefore I sacrifice to the Lord all the males that first opened the womb, but all the firstborn of my sons I shall redeem. It shall be a mark on your hand or frontlets between your eyes. By a strong hand the Lord has brought us out of Egypt. Now, when he starts talking about these festivals, and we're going to see more and more of these throughout the book of Exodus, those are memorials. So we've looked at Passover, and now the Feast of Unleavened Bread. The Feast of Unleavened Bread comes directly after the Passover. The Passover was a festival of the time when the death angel passed over them, again, as I just said, because of the blood. Now, the Feast of the Unleavened Bread talks about the purification as they were leaving Egypt. They symbolically left behind the impurities of Egypt, but also they symbolically were able to purify themselves of that and to not have any of those impurifications, if you will, that they left behind in Egypt. Now, it talks about redeeming. Redeeming is not something that we think about in this day and time. I can remember as a child, we used to have those green stamp books, and I don't remember a lot or the side note or whatever behind those. But I know if you got so many of those stamps filled out that you can go and redeem them for something else. Present day, if you go to one of those pizza places that are or amusement parks, I guess have those too, where you play the games, and if you win the game or you get so many points in the game, you get those little tickets. And after so many of those tickets, you can go and redeem those tickets for a prize. So the tickets in and of themselves are not worth anything, but the act of redeeming them makes that of value to something else. And if you get enough tickets, the more tickets you have, the bigger the prize that you can redeem those for. Now, what this is talking about, our firstborn, they were able to get those redeemed by sacrificing something on behalf of that child. So God didn't want the child to be sacrificed. Other people groups, other nations, other religions were known for sacrificing their children. And this is not what God, our God, Jehovah God, one and only God, was about. He was about the redemption. Now, of course, as I alluded to earlier, Jesus, as the firstborn, redeemed us. He paid the price for our sin. There's no debt outstanding now to be paid when you are bought by his blood. Now, that's why you hear all those kind of churchy terms at times: bought by the blood, redeemed by the blood, redemption. He paid the redemption price for us, so that we may no longer be under the penalty of sin. The penalty of sin is death. Romans 3:23, for the wages of sin is death, but the gift of God is eternal life. So that payment for sin is death. Since the beginning, since there was sin in the garden with Adam and Eve, there was death. There had to be death there in the garden. There was death with the animals that they killed to make a covering for themselves. Through this feast, so there was a feast they could consecrate and redeem their firstborn back, up until the redemption that Christ paid for us, where there was no longer any necessary or any need for any further redemption, because he paid the price for us all. Now, let me move to verse number 17. When Pharaoh let the people go, God did not lead them by the way of the land of the Philistines, although that was near. For God said, lest the people change their minds when they see war and return to Egypt. But God led the people around by the way of the wilderness toward the Red Sea. And the people of Israel went out of the land of Egypt equipped for battle. Moses took the bones of Joseph with them, for Joseph had made his sons of Israel to solemnly swear, saying, God will surely visit you, and you shall carry up my bones from here. And they moved on from Succoth and encamped at Etham on the edge of the wilderness. And the Lord went before them by day in a pillar of cloud to lead them on the way, and by night in a pillar of fire to give them light, that they might travel by day and by night. The pillar of cloud by day and the pillar of fire by night did not depart from before the people. Now, a couple things there. Reminder of God's past provision, where he took care of Joseph, took care of really all of them, because, and again, I won't go through that whole story here because of time, but Joseph ended up in Egypt under very diverse situations and circumstances, but that ultimately was a part of God's plan, because that led to the salvation of really all the world because of the famine. Now, you have God leading them away from Egypt, not in the shortest way. Again, that's another point to be made there, that God does not always lead you in the easiest path or the shortest way to get there, because in this case, this would have led them by the land of the Philistines, and we'll see the Philistines later on in the Old Testament. They were a people of war, and so God said when the people see the war, they will want to turn around and go back because it's difficult. So God doesn't lead them into the easiest path or the shortest path. He's leading them on the edge, which is taking longer, but is taking them away from the distractions that they would have seen, that would have tempted them to turn around and go back. But also see here that God led them by the pillar of the cloud by day and the pillar of fire by night. So God led them throughout this whole process. He never left them. He didn't forsake him. We're going to see here in a little bit the importance of that cloud and that fire when it comes to crossing over the Red Sea, which is where we're coming up in chapter 14 now. So let me quickly read through here. Then the Lord said to Moses, tell the people of Israel to turn back and encamp in front of Pahahiroth, between Migdol and the sea, in front of Baal Zephon. And you shall encamp facing it by the sea. For Pharaoh will say of the people of Israel, they are wandering in the land, the wilderness has shut them in, and I will harden Pharaoh's heart, and he will pursue them, and I will get glory. Again, big thing there. I will get glory over Pharaoh and all his host, and the Egyptians shall know that I am the Lord. And they did so. When the king of Egypt was told that the people had fled, the mind of Pharaoh and his servants was changed toward the people. And they said, what is this that we have done, that we have let Israel go from serving us? So he made ready his chariots and took his army with him. He took 600 chosen chariots and all the other chariots of Egypt with officers over all of them. And the Lord hardened the heart of Pharaoh, king of Egypt, and he pursued the people of Israel while the people of Israel were going out defiantly. The Egyptians pursued them all through Pharaoh's horses and chariots, and his horsemen and his army, and overtook them encamped by the sea of Pahahiroth in front of Baal-zephon. Well, let me stop there for a second. So Pharaoh took his best, his chosen elite army, and he said, you know what? What I've done was a mistake. I'm not going to let them go. I'm actually going to go and bring them back. This was a part of God's overall plan. As you saw in verse number 4, he said he will harden his heart. He will pursue them, but God will ultimately get glory over the Pharaoh. This is that ultimate victory, that last victory that I talked about at the beginning. It's kind of like when you skip over to the book of the Revelation at the end of the Bible, and you see that Satan is allowed to be free for a short period of time. It may seem like he's winning. So like now, sometimes, and not getting into all that, what it can mean or whatever, but just practically here saying the devil is roaming around seeking whom he may devour. We all know that although he's not omniscient, he's not all powerful, he's not all knowing, he doesn't have the ability to be wherever he wants to be. He is bound by that. He does not have God's power. But it does seem like sometimes when things go well, that Satan comes, that rebound effect that I had. But ultimately, and this is the most important thing, whatever you're going through, whatever distraction, whatever trial, whatever bad thing that happens, God's going to get the glory. I mean, everything is going to point people toward God, and that's what we're on the earth to do. When Pharaoh drew near, this is verse number 10, when Pharaoh drew near, the people of Israel lifted up their eyes, and behold, the Egyptians were marching after them, and they feared up greatly. And the people of Israel cried out to the Lord. They said to Moses, is it because there are no graves in Egypt that you have taken us away to die in the wilderness? What have you done in us in bringing us out of Egypt? Is not this what we said to you in Egypt? Leave us alone that we may serve the Egyptians, for it would have been better for us to serve the Egyptians than to die in the wilderness. And Moses said to the people, fear not, stand firm and see the salvation of the Lord, which he will work for you today. For the Egyptians whom you see today, you will never see again. The Lord will fight for you, and you will have only to be silent. I told you in a previous episode that this is the beginning of that griping. They forgot all of that stuff that they had to go through. They forgot the slavery. They forgot the misery. They forgot being beaten. They forgot all that trouble that they had to go through. And what they were doing, they were looking back. Jesus teaches this in the Gospels that a man that plows and looks back is not fit for the kingdom. So when you're plowing and you're looking back, you're gonna miss. It's just like that here. He said there's no looking back. There's no turning back away from when you leave for Jesus, when you leave for God, there is no turning back. Now there's going to be pressure from behind. Okay, there's going to be a lot of there's going to be a threat of whatever, of being hurt, being tortured, being killed. But let me ask you, what would have been worse? Because their argument was, would it not been better for us to live in Egypt and serve the Egyptians rather than to be killed in the wilderness? So they thought that their suffering and their torture was better than death and just getting it over with. They had forgotten, again, like I said, they had forgotten all the torture, all the beating, all the problems that they had to go through. Now, I'm not being too hard on the Israelites here, because we do the same thing. We take a stance and we make a move for God, and something bad happens, and then all of a sudden we're asking questions. Well, wasn't it better before I did this? Wasn't it better before I got saved? I had more friends. I had more acquaintances. I had more money. I had all this stuff. When you leave for Jesus, when you make a stance for God, there's going to be some pain. There's going to be a price, and this was that price that they felt like they were about to take here. But Moses reminded them to stand firm. Don't fear. God is going to fight your battle for you today. You're not even going to have to fight. In fact, the battle that he's going to fight for you is going to annihilate the Egyptians. You're not going to see them ever again. This is going to be the ultimate victory. Like is said in the end of the book of the Revelation, where the battle is ultimately going to be over. That's the same here. Now, we know that the battle was ultimately won on the cross. When he paid the price for our sin, when he was placed in the tomb, when he resurrected and defeated hell, death, and the grave, that's when that victory was won for us. There is no turning back. There is no, I don't know who's going to win, because we know that he is the victor. The Lord said to Moses, "Why do you cry to me? Tell the people of Israel to go forward." Go forward. Go forward. Don't go back. Go forward. We're going to see this in several chapters going here, that a bit of adversity will come upon them, and the first thing they want to do is turn around and go back. They want to retreat. They want to go backwards. God said, move forward. He told to Moses, "Lift up your staff and stretch out your hand over the sea and divide it, that the people of Israel may go through the sea on dry ground. And I will harden the hearts of the Egyptians so they will go in after them, and I will get the glory over the Pharaoh and all his hosts, his chariots and his horsemen, and the Egyptians shall know that I am the Lord, when I have gotten glory over the Pharaoh, his chariots and his horsemen." Then the angel of God, who was going before the host of Israel, moved and went behind them. So you have that angel that was which was the pillar of, which is the personification of the cloud and the fire. So this cloud has moved to the back. So the pillar of cloud moved before them and stood behind them. So the cloud went from in front of them to now behind them, coming in between the host of Egyptians and the host of Israel. And there was a cloud of darkness, and it lit up the night without one coming near the other all night. So God has moved this angel that was leading them out, again, seen as the cloud and the fire. He's moved them from the front now to the back, which is now going to offer or act as their buffer, their safety, their separation between Egypt. So these Egyptians have come up on them. They've caught up, but they're not able to take them out because God has provided this separation in the darkness caused by the cloud. And Moses stretched out his hand over the sea, and the Lord drove the sea back by a strong east wind all night, and made the sea dry land, and the waters were divided. And the people of Israel went into the midst of the sea on dry ground, the waters being a wall to them on the right hand and on the left. The Egyptians pursued and went in after them in the midst of the sea, all Pharaoh's horses, his chariots, and his horsemen. And in the morning, watch the Lord in the pillar of fire and cloud looked down on the Egyptians, forcing and threw the Egyptians into a panic, clogging their chariots so that they drove heavily. And the Egyptians said, "Let us flee from before the Lord," and the Lord fights for them and against the Egyptians. And the Lord said to Moses, "Stretch out your hand over the sea, that the waters may come back upon the Egyptians and their chariots and upon their horsemen." So Moses stretched out his hand over the sea, and the sea returned to its normal course, and the morning appeared. And as the Egyptians fled it, the Lord threw the Egyptians into the midst of the sea. The waters returned and covered the chariots and the horsemen and all the host of Pharaoh that had followed them into the sea. Not one of them remained. But the people of Israel walked on dry ground through the sea, the waters being a wall on them on the right hand and the left. Thus the Lord saved Israel that day from the hand of the Egyptians. And Israel, I can turn the page here, saw the Egyptians dead on the seashore. Israel saw the great power that the Lord used against the Egyptians, so the people feared the Lord, and they believed in the Lord and in his servant Moses. So picture this huge chaotic scene where you're coming up on the Red Sea. The people have come upon the Red Sea, and they're trapped, or at least they think they're trapped, because behind them they see Egypt's chariots and warriors coming up on them to catch them and to take them back. And so you have this chaotic state. Then you have God telling Moses to take out your staff, that same staff that we saw way back in the earlier chapters of Exodus, and he caused the wind to blow, the waters parted on both sides, the ground was dry, and so you have these two walls, and so you're walking through, I would say, probably hundreds or thousands of feet high, because the sea would have been great. It was huge, steep. So imagine the picture you see here of the people crossing over with water parted on both sides. You see all the things inside of there. You see the fish. You see all this, but there's a wall of protection around the people of Israel as they're crossing over. God's protecting them. He is delivering them out of Egypt. And it's going to be a final battle, because once they get across, the Egyptians are now allowed to move forward. That cloud that was hovering over them where they couldn't get to the Egyptians was now back in the front, or to the Israelites was now back in front. And they tried to cross over as well. Well, as soon as they were starting to cross over, God commanded Moses, take your staff again, and it caused the waters to come back over. And so you had all these thousands of chariots, horses, the people that were horsemen. You have all of these things that are dying in the water because they're drowning, because this water is coming back on them. There was such a confusion that they couldn't get out. And this again showed God's power and his might. To me, it's a reminder that God is ultimately in control, that he's the one that calls the shots. He's the one who has a mightier hand than any other hand in the world. And no matter what you're going through, or no matter what I go through, he is ultimately in charge. And he will one day ultimately show us his great and mighty power when he returns to call us all to be with him forever and forever. So you probably have seen the story. You probably watched the movies. It would have been a fantastic sight to see that water separating. It would have been a fantastic sight to see the entire millions of Israelites that crossed over on dry ground over where a sea was. But that's how our God works. He's a God of the impossible. He's a God that takes the impossible and makes it possible. So that's chapters 13 and 14. We have moved on from Egypt. We've left Egypt behind. We're going to see that doesn't mean that there's not troubles ahead of us, because there are. And doesn't mean that we're not going to make mistakes, because we are. We're going to make mistakes, which are going to ultimately lead to the death of some of the people. God, thank you for this day again. Thank you for everything that you've done. I pray that your word was taught in a manner that's pleasing to you. Guide us now throughout our day today and throughout the week. Help us to be drawn to you in everything that we say and do. In Jesus' name, I pray. Amen.